to do what you want. To do what you want to do with your sexuality, my body, my choice. To do what you want to do with your reproductive rights, my body, my choice. To do what you want to do with your masks and not having masks, my body, my choice. To do what you want to do with vaccines and guns and all sorts of stuff. You can go to the extremes of either side of the political argument, and you usually find them with the same definition of freedom, which is not correct. It's not a correct definition of freedom. I think I told you that I grew up as a military brat in Air Force schools, and every time we'd hear the jets fly over our school, our teacher would stop and say, "That's the sound of freedom." And so I admit, I have grown up with a very warped view of what freedom is and what freedom isn't. And now when we have a warped view of freedom, it really affects how we hear God's no. Freedom has totally become about what we want to do and what we don't want to do. It's totally become about having the right for us to pursue whatever's in our hearts, in our mind. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm intentionally poking the bear a little bit. So I know that several of those topics, several of those sentences I just said, probably got half of you going, "You tell them!" And then the other half had you kind of slinking in your seats a little bit. But I'm intentionally poking the bear a little bit because I want us to understand something that's theologically important. The world's definition of freedom is very different than the Bible's definition of freedom. And I need you to understand that life with Christ will infringe upon your freedoms. Life as a Christian, following Jesus, is going to mess with your freedom. It's sort of the point. There will be times where you want to do something or to say something or to be something or to pursue something, and God will say no. So we want to lay the groundwork behind when God says no. There's a book that I finished recently. It was called Live No Lies by John Mark Comer. And it has a chapter on this that I wanted to share some of those ideas with you because it helps us understand why it is that it rubs us the wrong way. So there are many popular sayings that are associated with freedom nowadays and with differing definitions of freedom. So you hear things like, the heart wants what the heart wants. Have you heard that? Follow your heart. Have you heard that? Disney. Yes, Disney. We need to write a chapter on Disney theology invading the church. Yes, that's correct. If you just look into a mirror and sing a song, your heart will lead you. You do you. Have you heard that? Speak your truth. Be true to yourself. In fact, I want to challenge you today. This is the Super Bowl commercial challenge. So I'm just going to ask you to just take notice of these themes in the Super Bowl and what is being sold to you on how to build your life, on the things that will provide a firm foundation for your life. So watch for those messages in today's Super Bowl, and extra credit for whoever counts how many times you see that. You will get a free mask there in the foyer. So most definitions of freedom have to do with following your heart or following your intellect, but what the world calls heart and intellect, the Bible calls flesh. Listen to what Paul says about your flesh. This is your heart and your intellect in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world, and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the Spirit, who is now at work in those who are disobedient. All of us also lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires in heart. So do me a favor real quick. If you're looking for that, that's Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Gratifying the cravings of our flesh, following its desires, point to your heart, and thoughts. So the Bible over and over and over is incredibly open about the dark side of the human heart, about the dark side of the flesh. Now, what's really interesting is that non-Christian scientists, atheists, and agnostic psychologists are also very open about the dark side of the very heart. So the dark side of the heart seems to be where everyone believes the same thing. Doesn't matter if you're Christian or non-Christian or agnostic or whatever, we seem to all come to the same conclusion that there's something that's dark about parts of the heart. Some writers talk about the good wolf and the bad wolf. Have you heard that before? Or the animal self, referring to the bad heart. Everyone seems to admit that. Now, a deeper study on secular thought and comparing to Christian thought, you'll find 3 specific places where the secular world and the Bible totally agree. Everyone seems to agree on, number 1, that the mind and heart have many desires, that there's lots of sides to our heart. Number 2, that not all desires are created equal. And number 3, that maturity seems to have something to do with editing that intermix that the desires of the heart have. So those 3 things, they seem to all agree that the mind and the heart have many desires, that not all of them are equal, and that becoming mature has something to do with the editing and reordering and prioritizing of these desires in our heart. Philosopher Charles Taylor points out that there's been a cultural shift from being a culture of authority to being a culture